Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds. In today's video topic, we're going to be talking about Jimg's generic Necrotic caster Lich. So the idea with this build is he was just simply setting it up for empowered monolith farming. He just wanted something that could just be as brainless as possible. This is just focused on monolith farming. He did hit about like 340 in arena, but there is a much more in-depth version of this build for arena of by Mao. I will leave that version linked in the description, but this one is definitely a lot more focused for arena as you're doing the things with Rip Blood, like the recast on Rip Blood, and just everything about this build is just meant to be as brain dead as possible. Just play the game like it's meant to be, mindless grinding Lich. If you ever just wanted to play a Lich build and you just wanted to zero out while you're like watching TV or something, but you don't want to play Poison Lich, now this is definitely the build for you. Now the idea is we're utilizing, he is going for 100% crit with a Rune Dagger and Catalyst setup. He's not doing as much damage as he could be if he went for a different setup, like with a wand or something. But he does plenty enough damage to clear like 200 plus corruption. So, and he's going to be pushing even higher probably as there's no stopping, it seems, so far with his build. The main difference between this build and Mao's build is just simply his is a lot more focused on just casually like monolith farming. Like for instance, he has max poison res just because like so that you don't die from random poison pools, which will happen at corruption plus 200 as things do a lot of damage at that point, as you can tell in the right corner. He's been able to do chance to dodge, just crit avoidance, and just all of the mods. This is all, he's mainly focused on being able to deal with all the mods in the monolith so that you can just keep pushing as much corruption as possible. Uh, Other things as well with this Lich, like this Lich build is as generic as possible. Like you can take this build into 5 different other versions. Like you would just want to focus on Death Steal's damage, well you can just take the frequency nodes instead and just focus on that. Oh, you want to focus on Rip Blood, you can get some Rip Blood idols and make Rip Blood do a lot of damage. If you just want to focus on like Bone Curse as well, like well, I mean, you're going to be using Bone Curse no matter what. And Mao's version actually is a version of this build where instead of Rip Blood, you're actually focusing on just spamming Transplant as much as possible. As in arena, you don't want to stand still and use Rip Blood, but while in the Monolith of Fate in the new corruption system, you can actually just spend some time casting Rip Blood and do fine. But in like I said, the arena version of this is a much more Transplant focus. So he was so kindly as to provide me with a build planner for the build, and we can go over that here in a second. But there won't be any idols as the build planner hasn't been updated to include the new idol slots. So I'll be going over that in the video here after the build planner we're going through. All right, with that being said, let's get into the guide, shall we? Here we are in the last Epoch build planner. This is pretty much exactly what he has in game. This was taken before the build planner went down. So we're just going to talk about skills first. So the first main skill important. So this build's actually built around Rip Blood. So he's utilizing the blood splatter chance from Splatter and from Eviscerate to cause those AoEs that you see in the video. This is how he gets all of his AoE clear. Then he also runs 2 points of travel into Arcane Absorption. He gets a bunch of spell damage each time you cast Rip Blood, which gives him a lot of increased damage. Then 4 points travel into Run Dry so that Rip Blood deals more damage. And then 1 point into Blood Catalyst so that it will automatically recast on trash mobs and clear very quickly. So you do not get blood orbs though this way. So this is a much more like volatile way of playing it where you don't get the HP back from the orbs or the mana back. But this is definitely a way to play it. Then we have one node in Rip Spirit so that it's turned into Necrotic. He's converting all of his damage into Necrotic. And later on, he actually even turns on his Bone Curse into Necrotic once he got an Omnis after the making of this video. So he was actually able to turn his Bone Curse into Necrotic damage as well. Takes 3-point travel into Hemomancer for the increased cast speed, then 3 points into Thirst. The main reason why he's grabbing Thirst here is because since he's using a dagger, in his build. Since he's using a dagger, he doesn't get the -3 mana cost, so Rip Blood would cost 3 mana technically, but utilizing this node makes it so that Rip Blood costs 0 mana, and then we have the +6 mana here, so we have 6 mana costs overall, which isn't as bad overall mana-wise. Now, the other nodes that are really good, Transplant is a lot of your single target damage, as the explosions do a lot of damage. So he takes 1 point to Acolyte's Fever, 3 points into Dance of Blood, so you cast 3 extra Rip Bloods every single time you Transplant, 1 point into Rain of Blood, so you get more explosions. 3 points for even more explosions. 3 points, so you get a little bit more AoE with those explosions, and then 2 more explosions as well. He also gets the version where he turns it into necrotic damage. He also gets the version with fear. This helps a lot in arena situations, as being able to fear things gets them away from you, makes them run away from you, which is really good. Although, in my opinion, I wouldn't run these. I would just run more AoE and then like run more cast speed, but that's just my opinion. Then he takes 2 points travel into sadism to travel so he can get to pale blood. So with his version, he only needs 1 point into this node to sustain his mana, uh, sustain the mana from Rip Blood, so you can keep casting it forever. If you put in more points into this, the issue, what happens is you actually end up increasing the cooldown to a point where it doesn't do that anymore. So there's a specific reason why he only has 1 point, is so that his transplant is still up as much as possible, even though it's giving him mana. So that's the meta with this node. Then for Bone Curse here, he takes 4 points travel into Conflation, so you can grab the Mark for Death on cast, so that you can apply Mark for Death, and we also have the unlimited duration as well on single target. This works later with Cursed Limbs later on, as you'll see. He takes 3 points into Iron Maiden, so it deals more damage. 1 point into Acute Affliction, and then 1 point into Illusion of Pain. So Bone Curse will always fall off after one hit, but if he applies Bone Curse directly on a boss, it will do 150% more damage and will always crit. This is only for the one when he does cast, because he's taking 3 points into Brittleborn's travel for the kill threshold so that he can grab Cursed Limbs. So Cursed Limbs makes it so that whenever Rip Blood or any of your other hits an enemy, it will reapply Bone Curse on hit, meaning that so every 6 seconds he casts Illusion of Pain on a pack and does a lot more damage, but then he still has uptime on Bone Curse during the cooldown, as he'll get cooldown recovery speed on his helmet, and he'll actually have a 100% uptime on Bone Curse. Now he takes 1 node into Ruptured Corpse, so it adds more of a mana cost to Bone Curse, but this is pretty much the node the build is built around. This explosion, it will actually curse enemies with Bone Curse and proc Bone Curse as well. It will just cause explosions. It's absolutely insane. This is the node the whole build is built around, is just to cause explosions so that you can actually clear packs very quickly. Now he is using this node, like I said, the unlimited duration, but Bone Curse is only on a single target. So when he casts Bone Curse, it's only on a single target. But then since he has Cursed Limbs, it will apply to every single target. So that's very strong. So it makes it so that the Mark for Death lasts more than 2 seconds. Also gives him a good 30% more damage boost as well. And then the other skills here, we have Death Seal. So he's utilizing Death Seal to go low life to abuse the endurance mechanic, taking 5 points into Corrupted Consciousness for increased damage, 1 point into Mortal Pulse, as he does a bunch of death waves, but it's completely fine that he's not grabbing the frequency, as it's not what the build is meant for. It's just in like an extra node. It's like a 1 pointer just to give him extra hits. Or you could make this death wave focus if you grab 5 points into this node. But the main reason why he did not is because he wanted the more uptime on Death Seal mainly. He wanted the duration, the haste, all this. He wanted the more damage as well. He didn't want the constant hitting version. Now, and he also has enough crit with the rune dagger and the catalyst, so he doesn't need the crit here. 3 points into Desperate Shroud for armor, travel, and then Deadlock. Deadlock is the most important thing about Death Seal, as it sets your life to 33%, so you always get the increased damage. You always get the armor. You always get the more damage from Death Seal's base mechanic, where it gets more damage the less health you have. So this is like 100% a must-have node for every Death Seal build. 2 points into carry and breath for even more area as well. Then 1 point into quick and the dead so that you get haste when your death seal's off. And obviously he grabs Moratorium for the maximum duration. Then 5 points into Doom Call for the more damage per damn stack. This doesn't really do too much damage to you, so there's no you're not going to feel it. And then for the last skill here, we have Reperform. This is another important one. So he takes 1 point travel into Soul for a Soul, 4 points into Reaper's Curse. He does 100% increased damage and crit chance, but he loses 2% of health on kill. But when you're at like 33% of your health, you don't really care about this node. 2 points into Death Comes Quickly so that he gets the movement speed while mapping. 3 points into Rapid Destruction for the cast speed for his Rip Blood. 4 points into Death's Touch Scythe. Since he's making all of his damage necrotic, he can actually utilize this for just 8 extra necrotic, which he needs because he's running a rune dagger instead of like a scepter, so he has a little bit less flat than normal. He takes 4 points into Executioner, so he gets a little bit more crit multi as well, and then 2 points into Swift Harbinger, so he has more cooldown recovery speed for his Reap. And that's pretty much it for the skills. So for passives here, he takes 8 points into Forbidden Knowledge for intelligence and necrotic res, so he has to deal with less necrotic res on his gear. 8 points into Vitality. You're going to be stacking as much HP as possible with this build so that when you are in Death Seal form, you have a significant amount of HP still. 1 point travel into Blood Aura, then 5 points into Blood Pact. It's 60% increased damage, but you have 5% of your health drained per second, but you actually end up this doesn't really matter as you just have so much leech and stuff. It doesn't matter that like this doesn't hurt you at all. I would not use this while leveling though, but in end game you don't feel this. Then he takes 8 points into Crippling Insight for the intelligence, as this is about 8% damage per node, as most attribute stacking things gives you like 4% increased damage per attribute. So since this gives you like 2 attributes per stack, it's a lot of damage. Although in the new skill tree, this has taken spot with this. So these two have like swapped, if that makes sense. In the new planner, you'll just have to mess around with it when you look at the new planner in the tree. But these two actually have swapped, but it's the same idea. You can just get the mana regen instead in the intelligence. It's the same thing, just a little bit different, right? 8 points into Dance with Death for the 120% increased damage, because you're always going to be at low life when you have Death Seal on. He takes 4 points, probably extra, just for the HP, so you can get up higher on the tree. 5 points into Grasp with Fate, as he's mainly running necrotic damage, so this affects all of his damage, which is very strong. 8 points into Bed of Souls for even more HP. Probably want to get the last 2 points here for the poison, for the necrotic penetration, right? You really want that necrotic penetration, and then necrotic shred as a mastery as well. 5 points into Deathbringer for the cast speed and the crit chance. 5 points into Dark Guard for the crit chance. You don't really care about the ward gained on crit strike because you're going to be running Death Seal, and Death Seal negates all your ward. Then 5 points into Clairvoyant Insight for the crit multi. 10 points into Necrotic Energy for the flat Necrotic. This allows him to run a Rune Dagger, like I said, so that he can get up to about 94% crit, he said. That's where he's at with this build specifically. So you're always going to be critting. So you're always going to see that yellow number. Then 5 points into Ageless Ascetic for movement speed, cast speed, damage, leech, health as a hit. Since all of his damage hits, this leech actually helps him. 5 points into Wand of the Fallen. Since he's running Catalyst, he can actually run this node because he's running a one-handed weapon without a shield. Then 5 points into Soul Maw here for just as much leech as possible, which is like this is a very strong node. That's pretty much it for the passives here. He doesn't run anything else specifically. It's as generic as possible. All right, now we can talk about gearing. Like I said, we'll talk about idols in a second here. But for gearing here, the most important thing is he's utilizing a rune dagger with crit and crit multi, as you want to crit as much as possible with this build. Then an unhanded Kados as well for even more crit. As you can tell, it's pretty shitty. For his helmet, but you can get a much better one, obviously. Helmet, he has cooldown recovery speed, level of Death Seal, increased health, crit strike avoidance. For his amulet, you want the physical necrotic res base, so you're capped on that. You want spoke critical strike chance, crit multi, HP, frailty. For his chest, you want the increased necrotic damage while transformed, as he's all necrotic damage, he'll be transformed as much HP as possible. His rings, increased mana regen, crit chance, void res, ele res, just as much res as possible, endurance, crit chance, just a lot of crit chance and movement speed. You want as much movement speed as possible as well, so you can like fly through monoliths. Dodge, just for that extra dodge, mana regen. You could probably run increased necrotic here instead. HP, the gloves, the endurance space with just some crit, cast speed, armor shred. Armor shred was buffed this patch, so it actually feels good for non-physical builds again. Uh, Boots, he gets the fire res boots, so some movement speed, vitality, critical strike avoidance, HP. Your normal setup with this kind of stuff. Crit multi, he did go for the poison res relic. I'm sure he would probably have gone for a different one, as there are a few better ones for this specific kind of build. Probably this one specifically, you'd want this one instead, but as he was just using what he had on hand. But yeah, the crit multi, increased mana, res, HP is like pretty simple. For the blessings, crit multi, got lightning res, so he doesn't have to deal with lightning res, the crit multi, the endurance threshold, and the chance. This is very important. You probably want the chance to shred necrotic resistance. This will give you a lot of damage. So I'd heavily suggest farming out necrotic res of a shred if you're going to be playing this build, as this build will fly through monoliths fast anyways. And then pretty much for idols. So they are in game here. It's just they're not in there. The main idol we want is this one specifically. Actually, 1 second here. This one, we want this one specifically with cooldown recovery speed. We want as much cooldown recovery speed, just damage while transformed, and then there's a cooldown recovery speed with transplant. This is what you pretty much want with this build, and then you obviously want some HP idols as well. As many HP idols as you can shove in it. HP and HP. And everything else is just kind of like whatever. Whatever you can fit in your idol slots for now. We haven't really figured out the meta for idols right now, but this is like what you'd want to be running with this build. Is the cooldown recovery speed and the HP. With that being said, that's pretty much the gearing. Thank you all for watching, and thanks to Jimg for letting me showcase his build. With that being said, bye!